nightmares.
I have been out here long enough that the silence feels normal, which makes the last 4 days stand out even more. The NOAA channel on the radio keeps firing off that repetitive alert tone, but the voice that used to follow it has been missing since Monday night. It cut out halfway through a sentence and never returned. I thought it was just bad weather or a busted relay tower. Now I am not so sure. I have been parked along a narrow dirt trail off Forest Road 37 for 2 weeks, tucked between tall pines and a slow creek that barely moves unless it rains. This was supposed to be a break from everything. My job, the noise, the regular world. I bought the camper truck off a retired mechanic who warned me the frame rattles in strong wind, but aside from that, it runs fine, good enough for hiding anyway. I burned through most of my savings to get out here. I was done with the office, done with the calls, done with being the guy everyone dumped emergencies on. Quitting felt like tearing off a heavy jacket after wearing it too long. I packed whatever cheap food I could afford and drove until the pavement turned to gravel. I set up camp, boiled creek water in batches, and let myself fall into a routine where nothing mattered except keeping the stove lit and staying warm at night. I went almost 2 weeks without seeing another person, which suited me perfectly. No arguments, no traffic, no demands, just the truck, the trees, and a steady sense that I could finally breathe. That ended this morning. I shot a man behind the truck, and I am still trying to process the fact that it happened at all. I have never fired at a person before. My hands are still unsteady when I think about how close he got. I am writing everything down now because memory feels slippery, and the quiet makes it too easy to question what I saw. If someone finds this later, maybe it will explain why there is a body in a dry gully 30 yards from my campsite. He first appeared last night near the tree line. I had just put out the fire and was organizing gear in the back when I heard something move through the brush. Not heavy, not quick, just steady. I thought it was a deer or maybe a bear cutting around the clearing, but when I aimed the flashlight, I saw a man standing between 2 pines. His clothes were torn up and soaked with mud. His face looked wrong in the beam, unfocused, slack, and stretched in a way that suggested he was not fully aware of where he was. He did not answer when I asked if he was lost. He stared at the light, took 2 slow steps forward, and let out a sound that did not belong to regular speech, more of a raw exhale than anything else. I should have taken that as a signal to leave the area, but I convinced myself he was injured or drunk or confused. I locked the truck and stayed awake almost the whole night listening for more movement. Around an hour before dawn, he rushed me. No warning, no cry. He slammed into the passenger door with enough force to shake the frame. I fired through the open window and missed. The second round hit him high in the chest but did nothing to stop him. He kept reaching under the glass, fingers scraping at whatever he could grab. I stepped out, trying to keep distance, but he came at me again. The third shot finally brought him down. He did not speak, not even after taking 2 rounds. He did not ask for help. He did not try to run. He did not panic. He just kept coming with an empty expression that made the whole thing feel unreal. When he stopped moving, I checked for identification. Nothing. No wallet, no phone, no pack, no shoes. His mouth looked torn from the inside, edges cracked and stained. I could not tell if he had done it to himself or if something else had happened before he reached me. I dragged him away without ceremony. The flies caught his body fast, and I did not want to deal with him lying in my small clearing. After that, I moved the truck deeper into the woods, off any trail where someone might spot it from above. I kept the tires on soft ground to hide tracks. I changed routines. No more cooking outside. No more reading by the fire. I keep the flashlight under a jacket if I need to see inside the truck. The bat stays by the door. The gun stays in the waistband. The alerts, the distant rumbling from the valley, the helicopter rotors cutting across the sky 2 nights ago. They all make more sense now. Something has been spreading out there. I knew it, but I did not want to connect the pieces. The radio traffic died in fragments, not all at once. That is the part that bothers me. It means someone tried to keep broadcasting and lost the ability piece by piece. The silence is worse than any message I could have heard. I hurt my foot last night stepping on a sharp rock. It opened a shallow cut across my arch. Nothing life-threatening, but it slowed me down. I wiped it with the last alcohol pads and wrapped it with a towel and tape. If it gets infected, I will be in trouble. I am still debating whether to hike toward the ranger station or hold out here. I trust the woods more than I trust whatever is happening near town, but staying put might be just as dangerous. It rained overnight. Light and steady, nothing heavy, but enough to erase any tracks. I checked the perimeter right after sunrise. The tin can trip lines I strung around the outer trail were still intact, though two had been disturbed, both on the east slope. Nothing broken, just tilted, like someone brushed past them and didn't bother to fix it. No boot prints. The dirt turned to mush in some spots and compacted oddly in others. If someone walked barefoot or with worn shoes, the rain covered their path well enough, but I'm not convinced it was the wind. There's a strip of birch trees lining that side of the camp, about 20 or 30 yards deep. Beyond that, a dense patch of fallen logs and younger saplings blocks most of the view. I stood there for maybe 10 minutes this morning, just watching. No movement. No birds either, which bothered me more than the missing tracks. I started noticing it yesterday, but now it's obvious. No calls, no rustling from small animals, no sounds except my own breath and the wet drip of the trees. I boiled a pot of creek water early, tasted faintly of pine needles and soil. Still cloudy after 2 passes through the filter bag, but I let it reach a hard rolling boil for 6 minutes just to be sure. Used the last half tablet of iodine just in case. No stomach cramps yet. I stored it in a canteen and kept it wrapped in an old shirt to keep the light off. I rationed 1 tin of beans and the end of the jerky strip for breakfast, then chewed on pine nuts I had stored in a jar from earlier in the week. Not enough calories, but enough to keep from shaking. Around 10:30 I heard something. Not footsteps, not talking. More like a branch snapping, and then nothing. Just one sound. No follow-up. I sat still for half an hour. Didn't move. Didn't reach for anything. Just listened. Eventually I crept out, checked the trap lines again, then did a full circle around camp. This time taking the longer route through the slope and looping west through a hollowed ravine where I set my second backup path. Still no prints, but I saw something worse. The man I killed yesterday, his body's gone. I found the patch where I left him. The blood was still there, dark and slick on the rocks. Bits of flesh or tissue, hard to tell. It had been picked at or pulled apart. The drag marks led maybe 8 feet toward the gully wall, then vanished. Either something moved him, or he got up and walked away. I stood there staring at the dirt for so long I lost track of time. Flies were still buzzing, but they scattered every time I stepped close. I used a stick to probe the nearby underbrush, but I didn't find any other signs. No clothes, no bones, just loose dirt and disturbed moss. When I walked back up to camp, I looked back every few steps. Gun out, round-chambered, safety off. My foot was throbbing by then. The cut wasn't deep, but it had started bleeding again, staining the inside of the wrap. I pulled off the makeshift bandage when I got inside and cleaned it again with boiled water and one of the spare gauze pads I'd saved for emergencies. It's swollen slightly, still pink, not red, but the skin's hot. If it starts to discolor or I feel heat creeping up my leg, I'll have to make a decision fast. I thought about it most of the afternoon, whether I should try to hike out while I can still walk. According to the map I brought, the nearest ranger station should be 9 or 10 miles east. That's if the trail hasn't washed out. There's a fire service road too, that cuts down toward a service depot, but I haven't seen signs of vehicles since I got here. I haven't seen signs of anything except that man, and now he's gone. I tried to raise a signal using the emergency beacon on the CB, but there was nothing. Just static and weak bursts of some garbled voice repeating numbers on one channel. I recorded it, played it back a dozen times. I think its coordinates. One of the numbers matched a spot southeast of here, near a power substation off the highway. Not close, not even useful, but someone out there is still trying to broadcast. That has to mean something. Maybe I'll try again tonight once the static dies down. I only use the power bank sparingly. Charging by solar blanket is slow, and the panel cracked slightly when I dropped it 2 nights ago. The weather's been overcast too, which makes it worse. Mid-afternoon, I spotted movement. I wasn't sure at first. I had just finished reinforcing the side windows with extra plastic from the tarp kit, when I heard a rhythmic tapping sound. 4 slow knocks, a pause, then 3 more. It wasn't close. Maybe 80 yards north, near the outcropping with the fallen tree. I waited, looked through the slit in the window I'd cut for light. Then I saw him. Standing behind the stump. One leg twisted, not broken but off-center, like it didn't fully support him. Shirt torn at the back, arms dangling. His head tilted up slowly, and I swear he looked toward me even though I hadn't made a sound. He didn't move like the first one. He swayed, like his balance was off, or his inner ear was fried. He stood for a long time, just facing the camp from a distance. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. After 5 minutes, maybe more, he turned and limped downhill. No urgency, no reaction. Like he lost interest or didn't detect me after all. I watched for another half hour. Then I slid out, circled around with the gun drawn, and confirmed he was gone. No trail, no blood, no clear sign of where he came from. I'm starting to think this isn't some fever outbreak or drug thing. It's something else. I spent the last 2 hours before sunset packing a small go bag. 1 full canteen, half a jar of peanut butter, my oldest pair of socks, the rest of the gauze, 1 flare, a spare mag, and the pistol. The bat won't fit. I'll have to carry it if I go. I'm still debating. My foot hurts more now, and the camp doesn't feel safe anymore. I've got 6 nails left and no more paracord. One of the canvas hinges on the back window tore this morning. If something gets curious or decides to press on it hard enough, I'll lose the only escape hatch I have. There's a smell drifting now. Not from the camp, from the woods west of here. Smells like burnt meat or something sour left out too long. I thought it might have been a dead animal, but it's moving. I caught whiffs of it in 3 different places when I circled the camp an hour ago. Always near the edge of visibility, like whatever is carrying the scent is moving with the wind. That was the tipping point. I stood at the edge of the trail for over 20 minutes, staring out into the trees with my bat held low, deciding whether to ride it out or finally go. I didn't have answers. I didn't have a plan, but something in my gut told me I needed to find someone who wasn't wandering half naked and trying to bite people. I figured if anyone was still out here with their head on straight, it'd be one of the old foresters who managed these trails. Someone with a cabin, a radio, or maybe just a clearer idea of what was going on. There were towers too. I remembered passing one on the drive up, barely visible through the trees. Could have been decommissioned, but I held on to the thought that someone might still be using it. But before I could go anywhere, I needed water. I hadn't refilled the bottles in 2 days, and the last of it had gone toward cleaning the bandage on my foot that morning. I grabbed my 2 largest containers from under the floor hatch and headed back toward the stream. It wasn't far, maybe a 15-minute walk downhill, but the last time I went, it had been quiet. This time, everything felt off. There were no squirrel tracks by the stones, no buzzing flies. Even the frogs that used to croak in the brush were silent. I crouched behind a mossy log as soon as I caught sight of the water, bottle caps clinking softly in my side pouch. That smell hit again, stronger. It rolled up the slope like the air itself had gone bad. I didn't hear anything at first, but then something shifted downstream. Not a splash, just a dull dragging noise through the brush. I eased forward, 1 step at a time, keeping my head low. The bat was strapped to my pack, and my pistol was already in hand, though the sweat on my fingers made the grip slippery. It took me another minute to get a full view of what was ahead. The stream bent sharply to the left just past a cluster of overgrown willows, and there, maybe 20 feet away, was a bear. Full-grown, brown, maybe grizzly, though I couldn't tell in that moment. Its head was down in the water, tearing something apart. At first, I thought it had caught a deer. The body was twisted and pale, clothes half hanging from the limbs. Then I saw the face, or what was left of it. Human. An arm twitched once, and then stopped as the bear grunted and bit down again, ripping through flesh like it had done this before. No sound came from the body. No motion beyond that final jerk. The torso was torn wide open, ribs exposed, organs already half-eaten. I don't know how long I stood there. My hands were shaking. My fingers loosened without thinking. One of the plastic bottles slipped and rolled off the edge of the trail, hit a rock, and bounced once into the undergrowth. The bear stopped. Its whole body turned slowly. Blood covered its muzzle. One eye locked on me. I didn't wait. I didn't try to sneak. I ran. I grabbed the remaining bottle, ditched the bat to move faster, and sprinted back uphill through the thorns, low branches smacking my arms and face, barely breathing as I pushed through dense brush without looking back. I didn't hear the bear behind me, but that didn't mean anything. I ran until my lungs burned, and my injured foot went numb. I stumbled once, slammed into a low pine, caught myself, and kept going. When I finally got back to the truck, I didn't stop. I threw open the driver door, cranked the ignition, and gunned it forward, tires spitting gravel as I pulled onto the slope and cut a wide arc through the trees. I hadn't yet packed up the tent and the small canopy that I had set up again to store some supplies. I didn't grab the extra ammo. I didn't grab the spare food stash hidden in the floor compartment. The camp chair, the map case, the tarp. It's all still there. I only had time to grab the bag I pre-packed yesterday. And even then, I didn't check the contents. Just threw it into the passenger seat and drove. The logging road to the north was barely wide enough for the truck. Branches scraped the sides, tearing at the panels and the mirror. I drove blind for at least a mile, just trying to put distance between me and whatever that was at the stream. I passed 2 trail markers I didn't recognize, then saw a faded wood sign nailed to a tree that read, "Service Gate 2 access for personnel only." I slowed. The road beyond looked overgrown, but it wasn't blocked. I followed it. It led to a rusted service gate with a half-bent chain looped through a cracked post. I got out, heart still thudding, and pried it open far enough to squeeze the truck through. The clearing beyond was small, just enough for a turnaround and a narrow path leading farther east. That's where I parked, turned off the engine and waited. It was nearly evening by then. I sat in the cab for over an hour, watching through the cracked windshield, waiting for movement. The smell was gone, or maybe I was too far away now. The forest here looked older, less traveled. The trees were spaced out more evenly, with flatter ground and little undergrowth. If there was a forester station anywhere in the area, it'd be somewhere like this. Stable terrain, clear lines of sight, and access to old logging paths. I took inventory while the last of the light faded. 1 half-full canteen, 4 rounds left in the mag, 2 granola bars from my glove box. The bag had 1 roll of gauze, some water purification tabs I had forgotten about, and a cracked flare. My foot had stopped bleeding, but the bandage was soaked. I replaced it with the clean wrap and checked the skin. Still swollen, but not worse. I could walk. Not fast, but far enough. I spent the night in the cab. I kept the window cracked just enough to listen, and stuffed a jacket into the opening to block light. No fire, no headlamp, just silence and the slow tick of the watch I left wedged into the dashboard. Every 10 minutes or so I hit the dome light to check the clearing. Nothing moved. At some point I dozed off for a bit, head against the door frame. Woke up with my neck cramped and a leg asleep. Still alive though. Morning light didn't bring relief. It just exposed more decay. A patch of deer bones in the brush nearby, picked clean. No tire tracks along the trail. And something else I didn't notice last night. Claw marks on the side of a rotted tree near the gate. Not deep, but wide apart. Maybe from something big. Or angry. I didn't measure. I just noted it and moved on. I took the pistol, left the truck parked, and started walking down the eastern path. If a ranger or old station was nearby, it'd be this way. Maybe half a mile in, I saw a faded marker. Just a wood stake with orange tape and a number scratched in pen. 8742. No idea what it meant, but there were small signs of maintenance. The path here had been cleared at some point in the past year. Not recently, but not decades ago either. That gave me some hope. The farther I got, the more I realized how far I was from anything resembling civilization. No aircraft overhead, no distant rumble of engines, not even the low drone of a distant town. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was hollow, pressurized. I started scanning tree lines in every direction, noting any shape that didn't fit the rest of the terrain. Once, I thought I saw someone in the distance through the trees, maybe a figure hunched over near a log, but by the time I reached the spot, nothing was there. Just after midday, I found a cabin. Old forestry station, judging by the faded sign nailed beside the door. It was built low to the ground, half covered by moss and brush, but still intact. The windows were boarded from the inside. One was slightly ajar. The lock on the front door was broken, but the door itself was wedged shut with a pry bar from the inside. I called out once. No response. I didn't call again. I backed off for now and circled the perimeter. No recent footprints. A pile of ash out back in a rusted fire ring. Half-melted tin cans. Some animal droppings. Nothing fresh. But the door being sealed from the inside, that told me someone had taken shelter here. Whether they were still in there or long gone, I didn't know yet. I wasn't about to force it open without knowing what I was walking into. I sat down next to the door and stayed still, using my pack as a backrest. I needed time to think. My foot still throbbed, but the fresh gauze helped. I kept the pistol balanced across my lap and tried to ration sips of water, not knowing when I'd get more. The trees around the cabin felt different, quieter, thicker. I couldn't shake the sense that this place had already been marked by someone, and if I stayed too long, I'd cross a line I didn't understand. It was probably 20 minutes later when I heard the first sharp burst in the distance. It wasn't a natural sound. A gunshot, followed by someone yelling. It wasn't panic. It was anger. Real loud swearing, bouncing between the trees, like someone was beating the crap out of the forest itself. Another 2 shots rang out. Then silence. I stood up slowly, grabbed my bag, and moved downhill toward the sound, keeping to the low brush and stepping carefully to avoid dry twigs. I didn't go straight toward it. I looped around, checked for movement, kept one hand on the grip of the pistol the entire time. What I found first wasn't the man. It was the mess he'd left behind. About 50 yards downslope from the cabin, I found a patch of flattened ferns, broken branches, and scattered supplies. There were 2 bodies lying face down in the dirt. Both looked like they had been tourists. Light hiking boots, khaki shorts, and one of them still had sunglasses pushed back on his head. One had an arrow through his upper chest. The other had a crushed skull. A few feet away, I saw a bent hunting rifle split near the chamber, completely unusable, and 3 broken arrows on the ground like they'd been stepped on. Near the edge of the scene, I spotted a canvas backpack that looked newer than everything else. It had a forest patch stitched on the back and a metal tag clipped to the strap. Best Ranger 2020. The pack was half open. I didn't grab it. I just stared at it, trying to piece together what had happened here. From the looks of it, someone was ambushed. Someone who had a bow, a rifle, and clearly knew how to fight. Whoever did the killing left in a hurry, or wasn't done yet. I froze when I heard another voice. Still the same man, still cursing, louder now. It was coming from just beyond a cluster of rocks, maybe 50 yards north. I crept toward the noise, staying low and moving sideways through the brush until I caught sight of him. He was kneeling beside a corpse, another tourist by the look of the clothes, but this one was twitching. The skin was grayish and torn in several places. The arms moved in short, jerky patterns, like the nerves were still firing without purpose. The old man held a rock in both hands and slammed it down again, and again. He didn't stop until the twitching stopped. Blood pooled around the body. When he stood up, breathing hard, he spotted me just as I was about to step out and announce myself. The old bastard reacted fast. He didn't hesitate. He dropped the rock and raised his crossbow in one smooth motion, sighted me, and fired. I barely flinched in time. The bolt shot past my right ear and slammed into a tree behind me with a solid thunk. My hand went to my pistol, but I didn't raise it. I kept it lowered, tense but not aiming, and stepped out of the brush with both palms visible. "Jesus, you could have hit me," I said. He didn't apologize. He just spat on the ground and muttered something about kids sneaking up on people. I wasn't a kid, and I told him so. He looked at me hard, eyes sunken, skin like old bark, shoulders still solid for someone his age. His hair was silver and tied back, and his jaw was tight with frustration. "You see the eyes on that one?" he asked, jabbing a finger at the now silent corpse. He wasn't dead. Not really. Stupid kid kept moving after I shot him. Took a damn rock to finish it. They don't scream. Don't blink. Just keep coming. He didn't lower the crossbow even though it was unloaded. I kept my hands away from my pistol. The silence between us stretched a little longer before he finally grunted and waved me toward him. I followed cautiously, keeping a few paces back. He called himself Roy. Said he used to be a ranger in this part of the forest until the tower he manned lost power last week. After that, he stayed mobile, keeping off trail and avoiding the access roads. According to him, this wasn't an isolated incident. He said he'd seen 5 different groups in the last 3 days. Hikers, campers, even a park volunteer. All of them acting strange, moving with that same vacant twitch, that same aimless persistence. One had chewed off part of her own hand before collapsing. Another had tried to strangle him without saying a word. He shot them all, said he didn't wait anymore. I asked if he'd been to the cabin up the ridge. He nodded once. Was mine before the lockdown. Boarded it from the inside and left when the radios died. Figured if anyone found it, they'd know it wasn't empty by the door. Guess you saw that. I told him I'd come from deeper in the woods. Camped out for nearly 3 weeks. Hadn't seen anyone until a few days ago. Mentioned the body I had to shoot. The bear tearing apart another at the creek. He didn't seem surprised. Just nodded and chewed the inside of his cheek. "The bear's smart," he said. "Carrion means less work. But don't think it won't turn if it gets desperate." I asked what he planned to do. He said he was heading to the ridge station about 5 miles north, where the old repeater tower was still standing. Claimed it might still have backup power, solar-fed, separate from the main grid. If it did, he could boost a signal, maybe raise someone outside the state. It was a long shot, but I had nothing better. He didn't offer to travel together. He didn't say I could come, but he didn't tell me to stay away either. Before he left, he pulled the bolt from the tree where it had buried itself inches from my head, examined the fletching, and slid it back into a hip quiver. He looked at me one last time, gave a dry nod, and muttered, "Don't sneak up again." Then he disappeared into the trees, moving quiet for a man carrying that much rage and wear on his frame. I stayed behind, trying to make sense of what I had just seen. The corpses, the arrows, the blood. None of it shocked me the way it should have. That scared me more than anything. I felt numb, like my brain had already decided to adapt to this and move on. While I stood there like a stunned idiot, Roy had already moved on. The last patch of trail he'd taken bent slightly downslope into thicker brush, and I couldn't tell which direction he'd gone after that. No footprints, no broken branches, nothing to follow unless I sprinted and got lucky. I started to call out, but caught myself, lowered my voice, and said just loud enough for the trees to carry it, "Wait, hold up, I've got a camper." That stopped him. Not immediately, but enough that I heard the scrape of something, maybe the back of his pack brushing bark, then saw him emerge slowly from behind a line of scrub. He wasn't smiling. He looked irritated, like someone had just yanked him off a better trail. "I got fuel left in the tank," I added, "and if you know where the roads are clear, we could use it to save time." He crossed his arms and just stared. I felt the weight of that silence more than any threat. The man didn't blink much. When he finally spoke, he did it with a dry snort. "I don't babysit, son. If you can't keep up on foot, you won't last a mile anyway." I bit down on the first response that came to mind. Instead, I just let out a bitter laugh. You worked these trails, right? Wasn't it your job to keep dumb tourists alive? His face shifted, something between anger and disappointment, but it didn't flash hot. It settled in cold. They weren't trying to eat me back then, he muttered. That changed the job description. For a second, I thought that was the end of it, but then he squinted at me, jaw clenched, and asked, "Where's the camper?" We cut through the trees, retracing a line I'd only used once on the way down. I pointed out a ridge marker, then led him to the narrow access road where I ditched the vehicle after the bear incident. It took longer than I thought. My foot had started swelling again, and the skin felt hot under the gauze. I didn't complain. Roy didn't ask. We walked in silence. When we finally reached the truck, Roy didn't even bother walking all the way around it. He stopped a few yards away, sized it up, and let out a long, disgusted breath. "This your rig?" "Yeah," I said. "It's not much, but it runs." He scowled, walked closer, kicked the front tire lightly with his boot. "She's rusted through under the frame, suspension sagging, batteries not sealed. This thing's an eyesore." I didn't argue. Still got half a tank, good enough to get us partway up the ridge. He muttered something under his breath but climbed in anyway. I started it up. Engine coughed, but it caught. We didn't speak as I backed up off the slope and turned onto the gravel road, heading north toward the ridgeline trail he had mentioned. The road was narrow and overgrown. Branches whipped against the sides. A few times I had to creep forward just to avoid bottoming out. Roy gripped the dash like it was trying to throw him out, but never told me to slow down. We made it about 4 miles before the incline turned too sharp, and the road all but vanished under fallen debris and roots. The truck's rear wheels slipped twice, even in low gear. Roy gave me a look after the second slide, then opened the door and stepped out without a word. I shut off the engine and followed. We stood there together on the edge of a clearing, the air dead still. "Better to walk," he said finally. "Too loud, too slow. That rig's not making it past the next half mile." I didn't argue. The truck had served its purpose. I grabbed the go bag, rechecked the contents, added a half-burned flare from the glove box, then sealed it tight. I left the keys in the ignition. Roy was already moving. We stayed off the main path, skirting along the higher ridgelines and keeping under tree cover. Roy's pace was slower now, maybe for my sake, maybe because he was thinking ahead. Every so often, he'd pause, crouch, and gesture for silence. We'd wait there, not moving, listening for anything that didn't fit. Snapping twigs, footfalls, breathing that wasn't ours. The first sign of trouble came just before dusk. We'd crossed an old service bridge over a dried creek bed, when Roy suddenly held out his arm and stopped dead. He pointed to the far side of the gully. At first I didn't see it. Then I did. Someone crawling across the ground. Fast. Not like a wounded animal, but like someone who didn't care about tearing skin on the rocks. The hands moved first, dragging the rest of the body. The head was tilted too far back, mouth hanging open. Dirt caked half the face. I counted 3 others behind it, all moving in the same way. Roy didn't shoot. He backed us off, slow and careful, and we crept away from the bridge into a lower draw. "No good fighting them here," he muttered. "Close quarters. Too easy to get circled." He didn't have to tell me twice. We moved fast through the side trail until we were out of earshot. We didn't talk much that night. Just set up a small perimeter near a line of boulders and took turns watching while the other tried to rest. I couldn't sleep. The images of those things crawling stuck in my head. They didn't look like people anymore. They looked like puppets yanked forward by invisible strings. I asked Roy, during one of the quieter moments, how long he thought this had been going on. He rubbed at his neck, cracked his knuckles, and said he started seeing signs more than 2 weeks ago. Sick animals first, then tourists acting off, then campers who attacked wildlife without weapons. Said the radio broadcasts went quiet right after the last emergency alert mentioned containment failure in the outer zones. "Government's not coming," he said, "and if they are, they'll treat everything like it's hostile. If you're not in uniform, or locked in some bunker by now, you're on your own." I didn't reply. There wasn't anything to say. I thought about my old life, the job I walked out on, the apartment full of boxes I never unpacked, the co-workers I never said goodbye to. None of it mattered now. That whole world had gone dark and silent without waiting for me to notice. We moved again at dawn. Cold mist clung to the ground, and the sound of the woods was different. Not silent, just cautious. Birds were back, but only in short, clipped bursts. A woodpecker drilled once, then stopped. Squirrels barked and ran, but stayed close to tree trunks. Every living thing out here seemed to know the rules had changed. Predators were no longer just animals. The repeater tower came into view just before midday, a narrow metal structure poking through the treetops. It sat on a raised patch of rock surrounded by chain-link fencing. We stopped 200 yards short and scanned it. No movement. No obvious signs of damage. The access gate was slightly ajar. We approached low, rifles ready, his crossbow drawn, my pistol raised. The gate swung open without resistance. One hinge let out a dry screech that made both of us wince. Roy muttered under his breath and moved in first, sticking close to the perimeter while I watched our backs. The interior was smaller than I expected, just a squat equipment shed with a rusted door, a grounded generator pad with nothing hooked up, and the base of the repeater rising up above us. We saw no bodies, no blood, no signs of anyone living here recently. The only movement came from a sun-bleached windsock fluttering above the tower. Roy holstered his crossbow and went straight for the shed. It was unlocked. The interior reeked of dust and mold. It hadn't been used in a long time, but that didn't mean it was useless. The gear inside was dated, analog in parts, but not destroyed. A solar inverter hummed softly in the back corner, wired to a junction box that fed the relay stack mounted to the wall. Roy gave it a once-over, then flicked a few switches. Lights blinked on the panel, faint at first, then steady. "Looks like the cell's held," he said. "Not much charge, but enough to power the signal loop. If someone's scanning for weak repeaters, we might have a shot." He grabbed the headset hanging off the rack, plugged in a coiled cord, and started tuning. The analog dial was slow and stiff, years of dust jammed into the ridges. I watched the edge of the woods while he worked, ears tuned to every sound behind the static. The first 20 minutes were nothing but dead air and the occasional burst of white noise. He stopped at one frequency, 7.400 megahertz, and listened longer than usual. Something faint buzzed through. Not speech, not music, just rhythmic tones, like a pulse buried under the static. He scribbled the frequency onto the inside of the shed door, just in case, and kept scanning. "Whatever this was hooked to," he said eventually, "it's not patched to emergency services anymore. No public relay, no rangers, no weather band. Just noise. Best I can do is push a loop and hope someone out there picks it up." He opened a small panel on the console and connected an old digital recorder. He kept one stored in his vest, wrapped in cloth. I hadn't even seen it until now. He looked at me and said, "Gotta keep it short. Power won't hold long." He clicked the record button and leaned in close to the mic. "This is Station Echo Ridge calling anyone on scan. Repeat, Echo Ridge active. Mad people present in wilderness zones. Multiple sightings near Trail 14. Civilian survivors moving northwest towards safe elevation. If you're receiving this, broadcast back on frequency 7.400. This signal will repeat every 15 minutes. He played it once to check the loop, then activated the transmitter. The signal light flickered, held, then stabilized. Weak, but live. That was the first time I felt something close to hope. Not relief. Nothing like that. Just the thinnest thread of maybe. If someone was listening, they'd hear us, and maybe they'd respond. We spent the next hour checking the rest of the site. A rusted locker near the base of the tower held a half-empty box of 12-gauge shells, a flashlight with corroded batteries, and a flannel shirt stiff with mildew. Roy kept the shells, tossed the rest. The ladder up the tower looked intact, but the top platform was barely wide enough for one person. No lookout station, no camera feed, just a blinking signal light tied into the repeater. Roy climbed halfway to check the solar cells. I stayed grounded, scanning the woods with my pistol half drawn. He came back down 15 minutes later, winded but satisfied. 3 of the 5 cells are feeding, he said. One's cracked bad, another's dead. Still gives us maybe a few hours of transmission before it dies without sun. We argued briefly about staying the night. I wanted to keep the tower running as long as possible, but Roy was already thinking past it. He said the tower would draw attention. Maybe not immediately, but the scent of electricity and sound would carry, and not just to people who wanted to help. I was too tired to argue. We agreed to keep the loop active for 1 more cycle, then leave after a short break. Roy dozed in the corner of the shed while I stood watch at the gate. I saw movement around 2 in the afternoon. Distant, no closer than 200 yards. Just a silhouette crossing between 2 trees. I didn't raise my weapon, didn't make a sound. It didn't come closer, just kept walking. When Roy woke, he pulled out a waxed paper map he'd kept sealed in a bag. It showed the surrounding forest in detail, every trail, every ranger post, every elevation mark. He pointed to a ridge southwest of us, said it had a shelter, old but defensible. He'd seen it once before, years ago, claimed it sat just above a deep ravine that would block approach from 3 sides, a good fallback if we had to run. We packed fast, left the tower running. Didn't take much, just what we could carry. Roy made a mark on the shed wall near the repeater, a simple circle with 2 lines through it. Rangers used it before cell towers, he said. Means safe relay. If anyone finds it, they'll know we were here. We moved down slope fast. No roads this time, no trails, just tree lines and old instincts. I kept the pistol in my hand the whole way. My leg had stiffened again, and the cut on my foot throbbed under every step, but I didn't stop. Halfway to the ridge, we passed a collapsed hunting blind. Looked like it had been built years ago. Nothing but dry wood and snapped boards. But there was a fresh canteen nearby, clean and full. We didn't take it. Roy didn't like the look of the area. Said it smelled wrong. Too clean. Just before dark, we stopped. Found a rocky incline beside a stream where we could hunker down for the night. Roy didn't want to light a fire, and I didn't argue. We ate the last of the granola and passed a single bottle between us. There wasn't much talking, just quiet breathing and the distant hiss of wind through the pines. That night was the coldest one yet. Not freezing, but cold enough that the damp settled into my bones and didn't let go. The rocky slope gave little comfort. I wrapped my coat around my legs and leaned against my pack, watching Roy through the dark. He didn't sleep much, just sat with his back to a boulder, crossbow across his lap, scanning the tree line. Every few minutes he'd look over at me to make sure I was still awake. He never said it, but I could tell he didn't trust me to hold watch alone. I couldn't blame him. I was tired, more tired than I'd ever been, but I was still afraid to fall asleep. The air had changed again. The quiet wasn't the same kind of quiet as the night before. There was a pressure to it, a kind of held breath across the forest that made you feel watched, even when nothing moved. I heard the footsteps just after midnight. Not close, but steady, a crunch on wet leaves. Then another. Then nothing. Then again. It wasn't an animal. I sat upright and stared into the dark. Roy already had his weapon up, but listening hard. He raised 2 fingers and pointed northeast. I nodded and unholstered my pistol. The sound faded for a while, then came back. Closer this time. We didn't speak. We didn't move. Whatever it wasn't rushing. Just walking, unhurried, off-path. Roy slowly moved to a crouch and gestured toward a narrow gap in the rocks that led up to a ridgeline overlook. It would put us above whatever was coming. We moved, careful, deliberate. No snapping twigs, no heavy steps. My foot throbbed with every shift of weight, but I gritted my teeth and kept pace. We reached the overlook in 2 minutes, maybe less. Once there, we hunkered low behind a fallen log and watched the slope below. At first, we didn't see anything, just the shadows cast by moonlight and the motion of trees swaying in the wind. Then, between 2 spruce trunks, A figure appeared, pale, barefoot, moving slowly, arms loose at its sides. A man, or something that used to be one. His neck was crooked, the muscles torn or broken. His jaw hung loose, only half working. He didn't seem to be looking for anything. He just moved in one straight direction, as if he were following a path no one else could see. Two more followed behind him. A woman, hunched over with dried blood down one sleeve. A teenager, maybe 15 or 16, wearing a torn hoodie that looked like it had belonged to a summer camp counselor. All of them walked wrong, off balance. Not dragging exactly, but out of sync with how people normally move. And silent. No growls, no moaning. Just the soft impact of feet pressing down damp leaves and moss. They didn't spot us. We stayed still until they passed into the lower part of the slope and disappeared into the woods. Roy didn't speak until he was sure they were gone. Then he muttered, "That's the third group today. This ridge isn't holding." We didn't sleep again. We waited until first light and kept moving southwest. Roy wanted to get to the old shelter he mentioned, an emergency stone hut built decades ago for rangers caught in storms. He said it was tucked up against the side of a deep ravine, half dug into the slope, with only one real way in or out. My foot wasn't doing well. The swelling had spread to the ankle, and the skin was tight and discolored. I didn't say anything, but I think Roy noticed. He kept looking back every few minutes, and once asked if I needed to rest. I told him no. We both knew it was a lie, but he let it go. Around mid-morning, we heard helicopters. Distant, faint. Two of them, maybe three, flying low and fast. We couldn't see them through the canopy, but we felt the pulse of their blades ripple through the trees. They passed west to east, disappearing fast. No flares, no loudspeakers, no sign they saw us. But they were military. I'd recognize that sound anywhere. Roy said nothing, but I saw his hands tighten around the crossbow. "What does it mean?" I asked him as we walked. He shook his head. Could mean evac, could mean quarantine, could mean they're doing sweeps. "You think they're helping people?" "I think anyone still in uniform has orders, and those orders don't include taking chances." We didn't bring it up again. The ridge got steeper and the air heavier as we climbed. My breathing turned shallow. My leg burned with every step. At one point I slipped and went down hard on my side. Roy helped me up without a word and handed me a piece of dry jerky from his vest pocket. It tasted like dust, but it gave me just enough strength to keep moving. We found the shelter around midday, just like he described, half buried in the earth, stone walls stacked against the slope. A rusted metal door wedged shut with a piece of rebar. The hinges groaned when we forced it open. Inside was one room, 10 feet by 12, with a small ventilation shaft in the ceiling. A single metal cot frame with no mattress, and a rusted stove in the corner. There was no sign anyone had used it in years. We sealed the door behind us, wedged it with 2 rocks, and took turns checking the vents for airflow. Everything held. It was musty, but not moldy, dry, safe for now. Roy took first watch while I rested. I tried to sleep, but the heat in my leg wouldn't let me. I stripped the wrap off and examined it under my flashlight, careful not to use too much battery. The skin was red, tight, and hot. No pus yet, but close. If I didn't get antibiotics soon, it was going to go bad fast. Roy checked it when I showed him. He didn't flinch. Just pulled out a small packet of sulfur powder and sprinkled it over the cut. It burned like fire. I had to clench my teeth not to shout. He wrapped it tight with gauze and tied it off with twine. "That's all I got," he said. "Might buy you a few days. No promises." We spent the afternoon in silence, conserving energy, eating the last of the hard candy from the pack I looted days earlier. I kept thinking about the signal from the repeater tower. If anyone heard it, they'd be moving this way. If not, we were wasting time sitting here. Before sunset, we spotted smoke on the horizon. Thin, but rising steady. Maybe a mile south. Not wildfire smoke. Too clean. Controlled burn or campfire. Someone was out there. Roy wanted to scout it, I didn't want him going alone, but I knew I couldn't move fast enough to keep up. He left just after sundown with the crossbow and one of the signal flares. Once he was gone, the shelter felt smaller than before. The walls pressed in around me in a way they hadn't earlier. I kept shifting my weight, trying to find some angle where my leg didn't feel like it was swelling against the wrap. It wasn't working. The skin was hot beneath the bandage, and the ache had settled deep. I tried not to think about how fast infections could spread without proper antibiotics. The sulfur powder Roy had used earlier helped a little. The cut didn't look as angry as it had that morning, but it was far from cured. I pulled the blanket tighter around myself and kept my back against the wall, listening for anything outside. I heard movement at least twice during the first hour. Soft, unsteady, nothing charging, nothing sniffing around the door. Just the kind of shuffling that made it impossible to tell if it belonged to wildlife or something worse. I didn't risk peeking outside. I didn't even touch the door. The only light came from my flashlight, which I kept pointed at the ceiling to dim it. Every few minutes I would click it off entirely and sit in the dark, waiting for my eyes to adjust and listening to the outside world flatten into a low hum of wind and distant creaks. The minutes dragged. Eventually, I lost track of the time completely. My watch said it was barely past 9, but I didn't trust it. The second hand had been sticking all week. I tried to stay awake, but my eyes kept drooping, and my head dipped forward without warning. I caught myself each time, rubbing my face, forcing myself upright. I didn't want to fall asleep before Roy returned. I wasn't sure he would return, but the idea of him walking back to find me unconscious felt worse than anything outside the door. Sometime deep into the night, could have been an hour, could have been 3, I heard the unmistakable snap of a twig right outside the shelter. Not distant, not halfway down the slope, right outside. I froze. The sound came again, but slower. Whatever was there wasn't trying to be quiet, but it wasn't rushing either. I raised the pistol and aimed at the door, pulse quickening despite my best effort to stay calm. Then a hand slapped the metal door, followed by Roy's voice saying, in a low, strained whisper, "It's me." I unlatched the rocks wedging the door and pulled it open. Roy pushed inside quickly, then forced the door shut with his shoulder before I even asked what happened. His face was tight, sweaty, breathing fast. Not panicked, but close to it. He glanced around the room, checking corners, then finally sank onto the cold stone floor. He told me the campfire wasn't a campfire at all. It was a burn pile. Someone had been dragging bodies there and torching them in small batches, controlled and deliberate. The fire had been built inside a stone ring near an old logging path. Whoever tended it wasn't there when he arrived, but the bodies were fresh. Some still twitched in the flames. He said the smell was thick enough to sting his eyes even from a distance. He tried to find tracks, but the ground near the pit had been churned up too heavily. The only clear prints were from boots, large ones. He guessed at least 2 people had been there earlier, maybe more. He stayed longer than he should have, and ended up spotting something he didn't expect. A pair of Mads moving down the trail toward the burn site. Not shuffling, not crawling. These 2 moved differently, faster, sharper, like their bodies hadn't decomposed as much. One of them had a deep cut across its chest, still oozing. Roy watched them stop near the fire, almost as if they were drawn to the heat or the smoke. He wasn't sure. He didn't wait to find out. He returned the moment he felt the wind shift, carrying the smoke toward the ridge where we were hiding. He didn't know if the people who made the burn pile were still nearby, but he guessed they'd be back. Anyone who burned bodies that methodically wasn't doing it out of fear. They had a routine, a pattern, and routines meant they'd come back eventually. The idea of running into them, or missing them by minutes, didn't sit well with either of us. Once he finished talking, Roy checked the bandage on my leg again. The swelling had spread, though the redness hadn't climbed much farther up the ankle. He didn't say anything for a long while, just stared at the wound, then carefully rewound the gauze and sat back. "We can't stay here," he said, voice low. "Not long, maybe a few hours. Then we move." I asked where. He didn't answer at first. He looked at the door like he expected something to knock on it at any moment. Finally, he said there were only two real options. North, toward higher elevation, where fewer mads seemed to wander, or south, toward the burn pit to try and locate whoever had been tending it. North meant isolation. South meant answers. And danger. Neither sounded good. We decided to leave at first light. Not because it felt safest, but because neither of us could walk at night without making too much noise. And after everything we had seen over the past few days, noise felt like the one thing we couldn't afford. I must have slept at some point after that. I didn't intend to. I was still sitting up, head leaning back against the stone wall, and then the room shifted and blurred, and when I opened my eyes again, the faint edge of dawn was creeping through the vent. Roy stood near the door, relashing his pack, the crossbow balanced against the wall beside him. He gave me a nod when he saw I was awake. My leg ached worse than the day before, but I could still stand. Barely. I wrapped it tight, muttering under my breath as I pulled my boot on. The pain flared immediately. Roy didn't look impressed. "We head north first," he said. "Scouts double back. People hunting people. They don't move randomly. They choose spots. Burn pits, choke points, creek crossings. We go north to avoid them, then cut west. Find high ground. Get a better look at the valley." I didn't argue. He had lived in these woods longer than I had. I just followed him out the door and let him set the pace. The morning air was thick, heavy with moisture. The forest floor glistened where dew collected on leaves and branches. We kept our steps soft, rolling our feet instead of stamping. Roy moved like the ground belonged to him, barely disturbing anything. I did my best to imitate him, though my injured leg made every step clumsy. The pain shot through my foot and up my calf every few minutes. At one point I gritted my teeth so hard my jaw locked. We climbed the ridge slowly. The incline was brutal in some stretches, forcing us to zigzag between stone outcrops and tangled roots. By the time we reached the first plateau, the sun had risen completely, but the light never fully pierced the canopy. Shadows clung between branches. Our breath puffed in small clouds, even though the air wasn't exactly cold. It just felt colder. Roy stopped twice to listen. Once he held up a hand and crouched low. I followed, heart pounding in the quiet. A figure moved between the trees below us, maybe 100 yards down the slope, hard to see clearly. It staggered a little, turned its head in slow motions, sniffing at the air. It had long matted hair and clothes shredded at the sleeves. It didn't notice us, or at least it didn't react. After a long minute, it moved on. We waited until it was gone before we kept going. My leg trembled halfway up the next incline and nearly buckled. Roy caught my arm and steadied me. He didn't say anything, just nodded in the direction of a fallen log and motioned for a break. Resting didn't help much. The infection, or whatever it was, stayed throbbing, pulsing under the wrap. I leaned my head back and tried to breathe through it. Roy sat a few feet away, sharpening one of his bolts with a small whetstone. His movements were absent-minded, but consistent. I think he sharpened things when he was trying to distract himself. "Never thought it'd get this far," he said at one point. "Not up here, at least. The forest always felt safe." He ran his thumb along the edge of the bolt, tested it, then slid it back into the quiver. "But everything runs out eventually. Safety too." I didn't have a response. I closed my eyes for a minute, then forced myself upright again. We pushed on. By late morning, we reached the crest of a taller ridge that gave us a partial view of the valley. Smoke trails, thin, scattered, rose from different points far below. Not thick like town fires, more like burn pits or small camp clusters. I counted at least 6. Roy counted 8. It didn't matter. What mattered was that we weren't alone out here, far from it. He scanned the horizon with narrowed eyes, then pointed toward the southwest. A narrow break in the trees led to what looked like an old ranger lookout platform, barely visible from where we stood. He said it wasn't a real tower, just an elevated observation post built decades before the more modern structures, but it would provide a good vantage point. We headed that way. The climb was rough. My foot dragged at times, and once I had to stop to let the swelling settle so I could feel my toes again. Roy didn't complain. He didn't even hurry. He just measured the distance and made sure I stayed upright. By early afternoon, we reached the edge of the old lookout. It sat on a wooden frame dug into the hillside, with a narrow ladder leading up to a platform big enough for 2 people. The wood creaked with age, but held when Roy tested it. He gestured for me to stay below while he climbed. Once he reached the top, he scanned the tree line, then waved me up slowly. From up there, the view spread in every direction. The valley stretched out in patches of green and grey, and the smoke trails looked clearer. Some were rising from deeper spots in the forest, places no normal campers would go. Others were clustered near old roads. Roy's face hardened when he spotted movement near one of the larger smoke trails. Figures. Too many to be a small survivor group. They moved in lines, not random, organized, not military. The formations weren't tight enough, more like large hunting parties. "Whoever's burning bodies isn't working alone," he muttered, "and they're covering ground fast." The idea of running into them chilled me more than any strange people. People who moved like that weren't scared or hiding. They were hunting, cleaning, managing the outbreak like they understood something the rest of us didn't. We climbed down slowly. Roy paced through the dirt while I leaned against the base of the lookout, catching my breath and trying to calm the rising nausea from the infection. He stopped suddenly, staring off into the trees. "We can't stay on the ridge," he said. "They'll sweep it. That's what I'd do if I were them. Push anyone down into choke points. Force them into the lower valleys." I asked him where we should go. He didn't answer right away. He rubbed the back of his neck, then pointed toward a narrow split in the hills. "There," he said. "Old mining tunnels. They used them decades ago. Not safe, not pretty, but enough cover to get past anyone tracking movement on the ridge." My stomach dropped. Tunnels meant enclosed spaces, shadows, echoes. No real escape if something went wrong. I looked down at my leg, then at the tree line, then back toward the rising smoke. There weren't good options left, just choices between worse and worse. We sat for a minute in the dirt, not speaking. The wind picked up, carrying another faint whiff of smoke and something else. Something metallic, almost like the air near a tool shop. Roy picked up his pack, slung it over his shoulder, and waited for me to stand. "We go now," he said, "before someone else sees that lookout." I took one last look at the valley, the smoke, the movement, the slow creep of whatever had taken over the world below, and followed him into the trees. And that's where we'll stop for now. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell me how the story hit you. What moments worked, what didn't, and what you'd want to hear next. And a big thank you to everyone supporting the channel, especially with extra membership: Carlos Herrera, The Great Anywho, Jay Dalla, Madam Midnight, Deborah Powell, William Blackwell, TJR. You keep this project alive. Until next time, Survivor. Jack's Nightmares signing off.